From the News Channel 5 Network, this is OpenLine.
Hey everybody, Monday night, Rory Johnston with you. Time for OpenLine here on News Channel 5 Plus. Hope you had a great weekend and enjoyed your day. Settling in for dinner or after dinner right now. We hope you'll take part. OpenLine is designed to include you in the discussion, so we open our phone lines for this next hour. 737-PLUS is our phone number. Be sure to dial 615. And tonight, a really important topic, something you hope that you don't have to really go through, and that is some sort of a crisis. And tonight we're going to be talking about crisis management and specifically strategies for businesses. And we know a little bit something about crisis here at News Channel 5. We'll get into that a little bit later. But our guests, Becky Stoll and Lisa Agabine. I got it right.
Yes.
Both from Centerstone. Both are LCSW's licensed clinical social workers, I should say.
Yes.
Becky, you're Vice President, Crisis and Disaster Management, and Lisa, Director of Crisis Management and Suicide Prevention. Did I get that correct?
You did.
Great. Thanks for being here. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Tell us just a little bit about crisis management and why it's so important, not only for businesses, but for individuals and families.
Well, I think as events, in the U.S. and across the world recently have shown, these episodes happen usually without warning and very spontaneously and very sporadically. So most of us walk through life thinking, that won't happen. But I think as we see in the media, they do pop up, they do happen. And we find whether you're talking about businesses or individuals themselves, being ready for how you're going to respond to an event, trying to prepare and see if you can mitigate, certain events from occurring, just puts you in a much better situation when those types of things happen.
So really, we talk about this, it's sort of like, getting insurance.
Right.
You have your insurance policy, it's set, it's there in case of an emergency, and you hope that you never have to use it, whether it's your auto insurance or your medical insurance or whatever.
Right.
But in this instance specifically, we hear all the time about families. Have a fire drill, a fire plan in place for your families. Have this ready or that ready. Maybe families have alarm systems on their homes.
Right.
They have first aid kits.
Right.
Some bottled water and the weather radio, all of the above. We hear about this all the time.
Right.
It affects businesses as well, though. I mean, it should apply to businesses as well.
Absolutely. And what we have found over the years is most companies don't have a plan in place. And if they do, it's probably got 4 or 5 inches of dust on it. Mm-hmm. And so to try to be more proactive, just like in your analogy where you have that kind of insurance, you hope if you have health insurance that you're exercising and eating right, you're trying to mitigate having to use it. And companies can do the same thing in terms of looking at really what's the foreseeable risk that they might encounter, because all industries are different, and what might impact a professional sports team or a news center versus your local insurance company office or a bank or manufacturing. Those are all different. So you want to look at foreseeable risk, and what you're looking at is foreseeable probability and foreseeable severity. And so if the event were to occur, how much of a hit would we take? And what really is the likelihood it's going to happen? And for those that end up falling in the medium to high in both of those, you want to look and see if there's ways you could prevent that. And then once you've done that piece of work, you want to prepare for what can we do if this really happens. But it doesn't really end there. Oftentimes I think people put a book in there, and the bookend needs to come one step further, and that's practicing the plan and talking about it. Right. Somebody said to me the other day, in schools, they drill for lots of different things, and even in companies, you do fire drills and all that, but very few companies do, active shooter drills or do, any kind of critical event practicing. And you need to make sure that you know what to do if it occurs so that you're in practice with it and it's not new if something really does happen in your organization.
Well, and what we know about traumatic events is that it incites fear and anxiety, and so if we don't have a plan in place, we don't necessarily know how to react. You know, we may just kind of be in that shock place. But with a plan in place, the likelihood of being able to recover very quickly from that increases.
Right. Those are good terms, fear and anxiety. You know, actually, just today here at News Channel 5, management decided to hold what we call a fellowship meeting to go over, obviously, and we're going to talk a little bit about this, the events of last week at a television station in Roanoke, Virginia, of course, which really is one of those incidents that obviously everyone was talking about, that, you know, how horrific it was, but obviously hits a lot closer to home when you work in the business.
Right.
And so we all had a lot of discussions about our safety, our crew's safety out in the public, and what can we do to, you know, minimize risk.
Right.
And then there were some other incidents. Many of you know our sports anchor Steve Lehman was in a pretty bad car accident up in Kansas City over the weekend. He's out of the hospital now and he's recovering. He's going to be okay, but he was pretty banged up and broke ribs and vertebrae and everything, and it was really a shock to everyone. And there have been some other things going on with some of our coworkers, and so it was just a time for management to say, hey, let's all just get together and talk and support one another and have a little bit of fellowship, which I thought was really a great thing.
Yes.
We're a close-knit company, so that just fits into how we are. I wonder, why are there so many companies that don't have plans in place, or like you said, maybe they do, you know, years ago they put together a booklet because their insurance company told them you need to have this, so they put the plan together and it's gathering dust on a shelf.
I think up until the past few years, the mentality has been, because we've done a lot of consultations with companies to help them develop these plans, it's been, that happened there. You know,
it's not going to happen to us.
Yeah, I think we saw that with, you know, living in Nashville, being here during, you know, 9/11 events, for example. It was impactful, but that was there. Or something like Hurricane Katrina happens, which impacted a lot of business. Well, that was there. I think we started seeing a little bit more of a touch point here in Middle Tennessee, you know, the flood exactly of 2010, and the tentacles that had in reaching business and how that was going to impact business and their workforce, or did their physical location get damaged. So I think we're starting to see, and then really just in the past year or so, when you know, a lot of these violent outbursts where it's having fatalities and things like that, you know, hopefully people are paying a little bit more attention. But I think to answer your question, it's that won't happen. Surely that wouldn't happen here.
Right. I think in addition to that, we just tend to be a fairly reactionary society, you know, and so we fill our lives with a whole lot of busyness, and so we don't really necessarily put in the time to have that plan in place.
Instead of being proactive, we're reactive.
Right.
737 Plus is our phone number. We want to know where you work, your company. Maybe you're a manager or really any employee. Do you have a crisis management plan in place? And what about personally at home? That's another thing. You hear it all the time, but have you really sat down with your family and gone over things? Or is it just one of those things that is, you know, down on your to-do list and you keep putting it off, and which is easy to do in today's society. You keep saying, you know, I'm going to get that case of water together, and I'm going to get the batteries together, and this and that, and I'm going to be ready. It's hurricane season. You never know. Well, we want to hear from you. Give us a call, 615-737-PLUS, as we're going to go throughout this hour and talk a little bit with the experts about what they do with companies and from the beginning through the whole process through the end. It is important, though, once a company has a plan in place, like you said, not to just put it up on the shelf, but there's a lot of follow-through here, right? With, you know, actively engaging employees and keeping it somewhat on the forefront of their minds.
Yeah, usually a company that's going to develop a plan, you know, the first part of that's going to be to develop a crisis response team. And necessarily the leader of that team is not the top tier of the organization, because if something bad happens, they're, you know, in our experience, they're busy. So you put together people that makes sense for that organization, who everyone kind of knows what their role is going to be. And then that team needs to meet periodically, and they may decide we need to have a first aid training, or we need to have a training around a certain topic, a safety training, because we deal a lot with the public. But the plan needs to be operational, and it's a good idea. We usually suggest quarterly, depending on the type of industry that it is. But sit down, we call it a tabletop drill, and someone develop. It's kind of a weird activity to undertake, because you sit down and you create a worst case scenario, and you are using the risks that you've identified for your company, and you pick one out. The first few times you do it, you don't want to pick the most catastrophic, devastating thing you can pick. You kind of build up to that. But you sit around like we're sitting here, and you do slides or handouts, and you kind of walk through, if this really happened to us, what would we do around certain things, notifying family members, or if we had to look at an alternate location. And what you find is when you undertake that kind of an activity, it'll poke holes in your system. And we've done it within Centerstone. I wrote lots of plans, and you think we would have it pretty tight, and it would poke a hole here or there where you would almost slap your hand to your forehead and say, I can't believe we didn't think of that. Simple things. Oftentimes you'll find a company that has one emergency contact. Well, we've worked cases where that person was killed by their emergency contact. And so you want to make sure you have 2 or 3 listed, so if you had to go down that list, you could. And where children go to school, we had a case where a woman had been killed by her estranged husband, and her coworkers saw that, and he was her emergency contact, and that was a horrible thing. But the bigger issue for the folks we met with was that her children were sitting at school waiting to be picked up, and nobody knew where these children went to school. So those are little holes you can post, simple things that you'd lesson learn.
It's almost like a computer company hiring a hacker.
Yes.
Which you hear about, where they come in and say, tell us where our vulnerabilities are. We need to know where to patch these holes up in our system.
That's a great analogy, yes.
We have to take our first break, everybody. We've got one caller coming in. We hope to hear from you as well. Give us a call. We'll be right back with more Open Line after this.